Thank you very much to all the folks who are on the line joining us remotely. This is our first, I believe, our first Twitch stream from the GitHub Enterprise channel anyway, so it's great to have you here. We have a lot of really exciting content to go through together. I think we have about an hour's time, so hopefully you walk away from this session having learned some things, having been exposed hopefully at a deeper level than you have in the past. And have some fun along the way. Again, this is going to be, I'm going to walk us through really a live demo. We're going to take an application that lives in a GitHub repo. We're going to add some CI to it. We're going to package it up using GitHub Packages, and then we're going to deploy it out to Azure together. And so because it's live, I just ask that you work with me. I'm going to work with you and give you the opportunity to actually follow along if you'd like to. So we created this public repo. So if you're interested, go along to your GitHub. If you have a GitHub account, if not, go ahead and sign up. Otherwise, just come around to github.com/octodemo/code to cloud Twitch public, and my partner here, Adam, is going to drop that link, if you don't mind, Mr. Adam, in the stream chat. So again, really quick introduction. My name is Kevin Alwell, and I'm a solutions engineer for GitHub. I'm also supported by a fabulous team at GitHub, and specifically today, Adam B will be my technical counterpart who's going to be moderating the chat. So I want to invite you to engage with us over the chat. This should be fun. And yeah, so I see some folks saying hi, so go ahead and drop in there, say hello. I'd love to get an idea for the folks who are listening, how long have you been using GitHub for? It'd be great to understand, what the level of experience is. And maybe also, what's your familiarity with GitHub Actions? So from 1 to 5, 1 being the least familiar, 5 being the most familiar. How long have you been using GitHub for? We'd love to hear that from you and let that guide us today. So again, thanks for dropping in. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you haven't already and you want to follow along live, you'll be able to do that on this repo. So go ahead and drop a star in there to let me know that you're walking along. And of course, fork it to your personal account. This way, you have access to this code and you'll be able to set up your workflows, there. So go ahead and do that. I'll leave this up for another moment. And Adam dropped the link in the chat. So if you haven't gotten it from here, go ahead and look to the chat and you can just, click through there. So let me just make sure. I want to check that we have a public repository. The repository is currently public. Okay, great. So y'all should have access to this. I can just validate that myself. Again, we're live, so who knows what the deal is. Okay, it is public. Great, cool. So you should have access. What I'm going to do now, some folks are starring it, someone's forking it. That's awesome. Again, feel free along the way to either just watch and have your beer. It's Friday afternoon, Friday evening for some of you. In California, that'd be a little ambitious, but okay, so some folks are having trouble forking it. That's good to know. So who did successfully fork it? I see Henwan did. So go ahead and fork it from Octodemo. Make sure you get the dash public on this as well. So it should be the dash public repo. Okay, I see what happened. So I'm going to just drop this in the chat. So all the folks on the line who got it from the chat, you should get it from the chat now. That's the updated link. Adam, I misled you, so I apologize for that. So let's go ahead and get rolling forward. I dropped it in the chat. You should be able to fork this. You should be able to star it. And follow along. So this should be fun. Okay, so what exactly are we going to be doing together? What is the exercise? Basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this application. It's just a simple Node app, right? Of course, we're just going to work with something that we're all at least at some level familiar with, which is JavaScript and GitHub. And basically, we're going to integrate GitHub Actions and create workflows for CI, for CD. We're going to package it up really nicely into a Node module so you could consume it externally or publish it somewhere else. And then we're also going to deploy it out to Azure and see what that looks like. So go ahead and follow along, and this should be a great exercise. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I actually already have this cloned locally. So this is my version. Again, yours will have a dash public at the end. And just remember that throughout. So if we're customizing different files and kind of pointing different places, just remember that. It looks similar. It's not exactly the same. So just be aware of that little nuance. Otherwise, you might get some 404 errors and things that could mislead you. So thanks for dropping in for all the folks on the line. If you just dropped in and you're just following along, watching along, that's totally fine. If you'd like to go hands-on, we shared the link in the chat. And if you have any technical questions along the way, my friend Adam is going to be supporting you. All right. So let's go ahead and get started here. This is going to be live. So, you know, any number of things can go wrong. Any number of things can happen. And that's kind of the fun of it, right? You might get to see me sweat a little bit. And that always creates for some action. We all crave blood. Cool. So let's go ahead and clone this thing locally. You can use your desktop client, your GitHub desktop client, or if you'd like to, do it through the CLI. That's how I've done it. And I already have this clone locally. So I'm not going to, you know, walk you through that process necessarily, but I will just show you that I have this application locally. Again, what is it? It's just a simple Node app, right? And what we're going to do first, we're just going to stand it up on our machines, or on my machine at least, to see, you know, can we run this thing before we try deploying it out, pushing out to infrastructure. The thing I always run into is, if I don't stand it up locally first, I always run into some errors along the way, and it drives me crazy because I don't know, I was lazy and I don't know, you know, where these errors came in. So we're going to record this. Spider Gaming, that's a great question. Yeah, we're going to record this. The link, you got to scroll up for the link. It's in that chat. And maybe Adam, you could drop that in again. It's the Code to Cloud Twitch-public repo. So maybe I'll drop that in one more time before we run this thing locally. And I also want to be respectful. I know some folks, awesome. Hey, Adam, just a quick update. I did swap out the repo. So this is the latest, is this Code to Cloud Twitch-public, just so we're all aware of that. Cool. Okay, here we are. Let's run this thing and see what's going on. So first thing I'm going to do is just take a look at what's in this application. You see, again, we just have a simple Node app. We have a web service set up with Express, and we're really serving up just a really simple application. You'll see what it is. I think it's like a calculator. So we'll be able to do, you know, be able to stand that up and see what it looks like in a moment. So firstly, we just want to install our dependencies and, you know, start up the server. So it should be as simple, I hope, for you if you have your dependency, if you have these dependencies installed. Otherwise, you may need to use Brew or some other package management system to install NPM. But otherwise, if you don't have, if it's not worth kind of installing these things yourselves, you can always just watch along. And I think the workflow piece is what's going to be really compelling for most folks. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to do, what did I do? npm install. I should probably type that right. Awesome. So let's go ahead and install our dependencies and just stand this thing up. And now what I did to you, and I set up your repo, and I kind of messed you up a little bit because I added, I think the node modules made their way in here somewhere. There they are. Yeah, so it's going to take you a minute to clone. So I didn't include that in the git ignore file, but I have that on my own, of course. So you might see that slight difference, but it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, we're going to do an npm install for most of our workflows anyway. So, all right, so we've installed our dependencies. You can see I have the node modules. You should also do the same anyway to get the latest versions of these modules. So I'm going to go ahead and just start this application up. So I'm just going to say npm start. And again, we're going to spell that correctly the second time. All right, so the server is running on port 3000. So you should have been able to do this as well. And you should be able to see, I'm just going to make it gigantic so you can see this amazing, sophisticated AI integrated calculator. And you can do things like addition. I know, it's awesome. But what is going to be awesome about this is how we integrate CI using actions. We're going to package it up and push it out to GitHub Packages as a node module, and we're going to deploy it out to Azure. So that should be fun, all using those workflows. So we've validated now we can stand this app up on localhost 3000. What I'm going to look for before I move forward is I want to see whether or not you're able to stand it up locally, or if you've, if that's something you're working on. So if you could just drop in the stream chat, if you're following along and doing a hands-on thing, please let me know so I can see who's kind of following along visually and who's, trailing along on the hands-on piece. So go ahead and fork this repository. And, if you don't mind starring it, that'd be awesome. We love to have your support there as well. It's always kind of a fun piece of gamification to star those repos. All right, so what have we done so far? So we see that we were able to stand this up. We saw what the app looked like, and now it's probably back down. Good. Okay, let's close that out. Keep it nice and concise. And so I think that's really the only thing that I was going to have us do locally was just make sure, does this work on my machine? And so, great. So Sebi, Transponster, awesome. Thanks so much for following along hands-on. Hopefully, we were able to kind of pull through this together and get this thing deployed. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close my command line. And you can probably do the same. Everything else that we're going to be doing from here forward is on the GitHub UI. Now that we validated we could stand this thing up. So the first thing that I'm going to do, though, before I even turn on, pull in any workflows for CI, is I want to validate that my dependencies are not introducing any vulnerabilities. And so there's a capability that some folks may be familiar with, whether you're a GitHub Enterprise user yourselves, or you've just had experience in the past by integrating dependency insights. Under the security tab, if you own your repo, you should be able to actually enable dependabot alerts and enable the dependency graph for your application. So what that's going to do is, let me go and actually enable this feature. So it looks like I made it to settings and security and analysis. And so what I'd encourage you to do is enable pretty much all of these. You may not have secret scanning, but I'd encourage you to enable dependency graph, dependabot alerts, and automated updates. And so what this does is it's going to kick off a scan on our main branch for any dependencies that we have listed in our manifest file. It's going to map those dependencies back against GitHub's advisory database, and we're going to see whether or not there are any open vulnerabilities against those, against those dependencies. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just to make sure I don't push anything to production that shouldn't be there in terms of the open source consumption. Cool. So in a few moments, we should see something pop up in the security tab. And in the meantime, I'll just go ahead and get us started in integrating some workflows. Awesome. So some folks already have it active. That's cool. Yeah. So I see some other folks in the chat saying, make sure that you update the package name to your username. Good point. Yeah. So in your package JSON, and maybe I should show that on here. In your package JSON, you're probably going to want to update this. Right now, it's pointing back to probably, actually, I think your version says, here, let me go back to your version so you can see. Your version says your username. So you're going to want to drop in your GitHub handle there. And this is going to be for when we're actually trying to push back out to our GitHub Packages instance. That's going to be scoped to your repo. And just keep in mind, for the enterprise context, I think that is really kind of an underlying theme here, that you can also publish these packages out so they're organization scoped, not just to your repo. So let's see what's going on here. Do we get any security alerts? So far, so good. Okay, no vulnerabilities yet. Surprised to see that. I thought that there were, but that's great. If you got any vulnerabilities popping up on your versions, go ahead and let me know that that you do have that. I'd love to see, because I was testing earlier and I thought I did, but that's totally okay. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to go into the Actions tab. So you should see this Actions tab at the top here. And this is, going to be a really familiar workflow for the folks who have integrated CI at any level, in your own projects, in your own, in your professional work or personally. But something that I do want to share with you, you may not have seen yet, I think it shipped last week or really recently, was this idea of having org templates. And that's super cool. I'll set this one up for us. But the idea with this org template, you can see it was set up by the organization for this type of project, right? That means that somebody on my team who essentially manages the pipelines for the organization actually set up a workflow template that I can then consume and use to build off of in my project if I have a project that kind of matches that scope, right? And again, there's going to be some degree of customization along the way, but but I guess that's just to be expected. So what is this one? It looks like a simple workflow. All we're going to do is actually echo something saying hello from Octo Demo Organization. So again, I think we're just really illustrating the fact that this capability is out there and available for your use. So why don't we do this? And this is going to be a good kind of primer for when we actually open up one of the CI workflows, is to understand how it's been laid out and what the triggers and keys are here. So what you have is, so you're going to want to obviously name your workflow. That'll be indicated back when you actually run your workflows. And you can actually subscribe to a number of triggers across not just this repository, but in theory, you could subscribe to any external webhook event as well. And you can get pretty granular with the filters that you can apply here. What you see that I've done, or what was included anyway in this workflow template, is that on push to the test branch or on pull request against the test branch, I'm going to trigger this workflow, right? And the jobs that are going to be triggered are, if you look at line number 10, is this build on Ubuntu, the latest version, which you can also specify. Actually, maybe Adam, I can tap you to share the docs here. If you don't mind sharing the workflow docs, Adam, that'd be super great so folks can just kind of cross-reference those. But the point is that you can define, what version of your operating system you want to run this workflow on. So a consistent theme that you'll see across really all the workflows is one of the steps is always to get the latest version of your repo and pull that into the runner itself. And so that happens at runtime here with this step where we check out actions. And then this is really the meat and potatoes, which obviously is super simple for this use case, but we're running a one-line script that's just going to echo hello from Octo.org. And what's really cool about this though is the fact that this has been defined by some central pipeline team. So if that's you, this is the tool that you would use, is in your .github directory at the organization level, instead of at this repository level, you'd be able to define workflows for everyone across your org, which is super great. So I'm gonna go ahead and just commit this file. Actually, maybe what I'll do is say on, I'm actually just going to have it run on pull request against master for now. Just going to go ahead and delete that, what was there already. You don't have this. So you're probably like, this guy told me to follow along and I'm already lost because I don't have those workflow templates. This is going to take a moment. I want to show this off a little bit because it's a new feature that I know a lot of folks are kind of waiting for. So what is important to note again is the directory structure. So you see that all of my workflows are going to be stored in this .github directory, and that's automatically generated when I clicked set up my workflow. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and just call it, I don't know, org template. Propose that file change. Kind of a sloppy commit message. Do as I say, not as I do. And I'm just going to go ahead and open up that pull request against master. And I believe that's what I ran it against. We'll see if, we'll see how this thing triggers in a minute here. Oh, there it is. Cool. There it is. Nice. Okay, so we see some checks that are happening. So again, we triggered it on the PR. This is automatically integrated with the status checks API. So you can see, obviously this is not actually, so somebody named it kind of funky, but the point is that I subscribe to this specific event and now we kicked it off and it's already integrated back into my PR workflow. And so we could go into this workflow that's run and you could see the jobs and you could dig into the logs. And these are live logs, so you can actually dig in as they're being executed. I'm not gonna merge that change. All right, friends, so here we are again. How are we doing so far? So I see some questions that are popping up. Yeah, so I see some great questions that are popping up in the chat. So I'm going to encourage Adam, if you can go ahead and kind of respond to those along the way. I appreciate that. And I think the point is, yes, these workflow files are exactly, so they're synonymous with your pipelines, right? So if you have any pipelines defined in any other tool, in GitHub, we refer to those as workflows. Okay, so your workflows are your pipelines as code. All right, so let's go ahead and keep rolling forward here. And let's enable, I think we have the dependency scan enabled. We have secret detection going. I don't know if you'll actually have secret detection on your public repo because we've been doing that automatically, I think, for some time. But in the private repo world, we just shipped with GitHub Advanced Security the ability to do native secret scanning. So I have that enabled. Again, it's kind of one of the small nuances that maybe you won't have yet, but we're running a scan in the background here to see if any secrets have been detected. All right, so now let's bake in some CI and take it from there. So some of the folks in line, again, feel free, if I talk to what the next task is and you wanna go ahead and do that before I get there, that's totally okay too. And just feel free if you get stopped along the way to ask questions or just wait till we get there together. So what I'm gonna do is click on this Actions tab. You should see that, again, that interface that shows you all the templated workflows, but I have this new workflow button. So I'm gonna go ahead and click that and scroll past the org templates. So the suggested org templates. And what am I looking for? I think I said I'm looking for, excuse me, we'll come back to these later. So these are, any service provider that's built an integration into GitHub Actions, which is really most modern service providers, which is awesome because it really accelerates your ability to deliver these pipelines. But we should also have CI for Node, and that's what I'm looking for. So publish Node.js package. We'll come back for this too, but that's not what we're looking for right now. Let's see where it is. Let me know if I missed it. I don't know if you all are kind of scrolling along with me. There it is. Okay, cool. So here's the workflow. It looks like we've actually developed it ourselves. So GitHub has this actions repository that we maintain ourselves. Actually, maybe this is an organization. Yeah. So we maintain some of these workflows ourselves. So you can kind of trust that they will be up to date and using the latest tech. So I'm going to go ahead and click set up this workflow. I encourage you to do the same. And just go ahead and drop in the chat if you're here or if you got left behind or if I'm moving too slowly. Again, this is your time, right? So feel free to guide me along and say, hey, this is the thing that's most interesting to me, and I'll kind of follow along for you. Yeah, great. So I see some comments and questions coming in there. So Adam's going to be responding to those with some documentation too. I see some questions about, can we deploy out Docker images? Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Cool. Okay. So again, feel free to set the tempo here. I'm going to keep moving at this pace. I hope you're comfortable with that. And I think we're making pretty good time here. We have something like 40 minutes left, so doing all right. So okay, here we are again at this familiar page we were just in. So what do we see? We see our repo. We see this .github directory, and so that's something to get very comfortable with. And we automatically package up your pipeline in this workflows directory. So be aware of that. And the reason you want to be aware of that is because we're shipping a lot of capabilities as code, right? We're shipping capabilities for infrastructure as code, for policies as code. I mean, there's just a lot of really exciting content that's going to be shipped in this space. And so, this is something that you're going to have to be increasingly familiar with and comfortable with. And this kind of goes back to, that conversation around everything as code, right? And everybody kind of has to upskill across the industry. And that's definitely a trend that we've been seeing. QA is no longer kind of clicking along on their screen, manually validating features. They're writing tests against those features, right? And so here we are, writing pipelines as code. Let's look at line number 4. So we have Node.js CI. So I'm just going to go ahead and rename this to Code to Cloud CI. Because I think the other one was named kind of funky, and I just want to keep myself honest here so I don't confuse all of us. Let's go ahead and rename that Code to Cloud CI, something like that. And again, you can specify the triggers on push the master, on pull request against master. I'm probably going to run my CI on pull request against master because I love that interface where if I open a PR, I can see the status report back. And I'm sure you have that already integrated with some of your CI tooling today. And so that is going to be automatically integrated. You don't have to maintain the webhooks, from any external service. It's all baked in native. So that's super cool. All right, so there are some jobs already baked in here. We see build, we're defining the operating system. And so this is interesting. So we're actually defining this as a matrix build, and we're gonna run the CI across a few versions of Node in parallel. So 10, 12, and 14x. Okay, and maybe we'll slim this down later if it starts, soaking up a little too much of our screen real estate. So, feel free to strip that from your own if you're following along and, you just want to do 10.x or whatever, that's totally okay too. I think this is more illustrating the capability and it's just a template, right? So making it kind of easier for you to get started. So our application, you're probably waiting for me down here. You're like, what is defined as an actual command? So we do not have npm CI, that is npm test for us. And we also don't necessarily need to build this application. So I am going to remove that as well and just run npm test against it when I open a pull request. Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this PR and call it. Awesome. So I see Adam getting some kudos in the chat. Creating CI pipeline. Well deserved, I'm sure. All right, so open a PR. And let's wait for our status to pop back up here. And we should also see it pop into the Actions tab. Okay, cool. So now we see, again, we're running CI against these versions of Node. So 10, 12, 14. You can click details, wait for those checks. Okay, so our workflow is going to start running. All right. Okay, beautiful. So everything went great except the fact that our tests failed. So you can see the job was set up. We got the latest version of this repository using 10.x, and we ran npm test, and that failed, right? And then the job was completed. And it might even be the case, let's see if these guys ran or if they exited with a non-zero exit code. Okay, cool. So these all did run and they all failed in parallel. So let me see what the error is. Okay, it says NYC not found. Got it. Okay, so the nice thing is that I happen to know that what we missed was something super simple. So let's go back. If you're following along, I should have said this before, but we're gonna go back and go into that template. So go back to that branch that you created to introduce CI. So create CI pipeline. Let's just make sure we have all of our dependencies installed before we run our tests. And that's the reason that it's failing right now. So I'm gonna go in and go to my workflows file. So the .github directory, under workflows into node.js.yaml. And what branch am I on? Okay, you can see I'm on this create CI pipeline branch. I'm just gonna go ahead and scroll to the bottom here. And again, what's great about this interface is you can actually drop in actions from our marketplace. So you can search things, I don't know, you can search for things that you wanna drop into your workflow kind of dynamically. And this is already built out, right? These kind of templated modular pieces of functionality, which is great to accelerate your dev. So that's really what we're doing here too, right? We took this template and we'll be up and running with a simple, I get it, it's a simple pipeline, but we'll be up and running in no time. So, okay, cool. So I'm just gonna do an npm install before I do an npm test. And I would encourage you to do the same if you're following along. Just make sure you have all your dependencies installed. Actually, because you have the node modules folder, yours might have succeeded. So kudos to you for that. Awesome. Let's see if our checks will rerun. Otherwise, I'll just go back in and manually rerun them myself. But let's go ahead. Not this one, right? No, this one. Cool. Okay. Okay, so they reran. That's awesome. I didn't have to manually rerun them. We'll probably have to do that at some point in time when we start getting errors for stuff. Awesome. I see some questions coming in there. I bet Adam is digging into the documentation. Y'all are asking some really great questions, so I appreciate that. And Adam, we all appreciate you kind of running around making that happen. Okay, so looks like actually our tests failed again, but they failed for a different reason, and this was the planned reason that they failed, if you will, right? So we can see that we have the server running on port 3000 on this VM. We can see that some arithmetic checks happen. This is the test that we wrote for this application, right? So we can see that it adds 2 positive integers, does all this good stuff, and something failed. So there are 10 failing tests. So subtraction, looks like it had a problem. Okay, so if y'all are seeing the same thing that I am, either on your own or you're looking at my logs, you notice that, you know, there's a function somewhere that's probably broken. It looks like it's returning back either 1 greater or 1 lesser than it should. So that's okay. We're gonna go back and fix that here. And so something else that I should say even before I move forward is, what you can do if you decide to, and it depends how heavy-handed you want to be, and this is not just for CI, right? You can also bake this into your AppSec practices, which is increasingly conversations that we're having with folks because we have advanced security now. So you can, basically, if you'd like to block your I think most of us are familiar with this, but you can block your merge, your PR merge based on whether or not these tests actually pass. Okay, and so that's relevant for CI, but it's also relevant for code scanning. If you're looking for vulnerabilities, semantic vulnerabilities in your applications, or if you're looking for vulnerabilities in any of the dependencies that you're pulling in and you want to block it and say, none of my developers should be able to merge code that introduces a specific type of vulnerability, right? And so this is where you'll be able to bake a check like that in. So just wanted to say that along the way. Definitely something important for us all to be aware of. All right, so let's go back into our test directory here and fix that tests. Actually, I don't think that it's not the test that was broken, it's the controller itself. Sorry, so let's go to the repo, let's go to API and controllers into that arithmetic controller.js file. And we're gonna look for that subtraction. Yeah, okay. So some chaos monkey got in here and broke all our stuff. It looks like divide is gonna be 1 less than it should be. And subtraction will be 1 more than it should be. So I'm just going to go ahead and rip out that, you know, that what's breaking our test here, and yeah, and we'll see how that goes. We'll run it again. So actually, what branch am I on? Did y'all see what branch I'm on? Okay, so I'll be able to define that, or maybe not. I should be able to. Yeah, I'll just merge it back into that branch anyway. All right, friends, let's just do this thing. Let's go to line 15 and just clean up this code. Not spend too much time there. All right, I'm just gonna add spaces here. Doesn't matter. All right, so I'm gonna create a new branch. I'm gonna call it fix broken controller. And then this could be, I mean, you could dynamically link out to, like, you know, if you have an Azure Boards task that's open, or you have like a Jira item that's open, then you'd be able to just dynamically link that and say, I don't know, fix broke, you know, we'll call it bug 302. Okay, so now I created a separate branch, and I'm not going to want to open a pull request against the master. I actually want to open a pull request against the CI pipeline itself. Oh, so yeah, so I want to create a CI, against the CI pipeline itself. So this is non-master branch, and I'm going to go ahead and open a pull request from this bug fix branch back into that CI branch, and then we'll merge that CI branch together. Awesome. So I see some good conversations happening in the chat. Go ahead and if you want to give me some indication in the chat whether or not you'd like me to speed up, slow down, or focus on some different topics, feel free to raise that as well. I'm happy to do that. I think there's something that should be said is if you want to go deeper, we're going to share resources at the end. This strategy matrix actually works for a variety of technologies. Great question. I see you coming in there from Knoppers. So awesome. Yeah, and Adam, I'm sure we'll continue to share docs there. But yeah, so we'll share with you some resources at the end of this where if you really want to get your hands dirty and go deep, and you'll be supported by the documentation on docs.github.com to build out your own pipelines for actual applications, right? That can be definitely more complex than what we're showing. So let me just go ahead and open this PR, and I'm going to do something that's dirty, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and merge it myself. It doesn't have those workflows on it, so it's not going to kick off any sort of CI or anything. So that should be merged. I'm going to go ahead and delete that branch. And I'm going to go back into my PRs. And you can see that my tests are now running again. So you can see that this PR or this merge happened from this branch back into ours. So our test should be passing now. We'll see. I don't know. And so you can see that all these checks started to kick off again. And it's wondering whether or not you know, those will pass and we can merge from there. So I'm hoping that it passes here. I think we're all probably kind of sick of setting up tests on such a simple application, but I think we're demonstrating a lot of really kind of fundamental pieces of the platform. So it's important at least to touch on them. All right, cool. Looks like our tests passed with 10.x, 14x, 12x has taken a little while for some reason. Job's getting set up. So I'll go ahead and let that hang out there for a minute. I don't think there's any reason why I need to monitor it. So we'll let that hang for a minute. And in the meantime, maybe what we'll do is begin to package this application as a node module. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do that using GitHub Packages. We're gonna publish our first package. Don't click this link, I'm just hovering over it. We're gonna go ahead and publish our first package. This way it'll be, it'll just show you how to make an application consumable via a package that's been pushed to and stored in GitHub Packages. Again, as an org, you'll be able to do this at the org level, which is really useful for things like inner sourcing. I know we have a lot of conversations with your teams about that, which is really to take that open source concept internally, right? And reuse what you can to accelerate your velocity. So that's kind of the idea there. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and I wonder if that passed. Okay, cool. So here we are 10 minutes ago. All right, so it looks like all these tests passed. I'm happy with that. If you're happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and merge this PR at this point. Obviously, you'd have additional checks in your production environment where you'd have to have someone come along and approve this or review this and drop in comments along the way. But just for the simple use case, I'm going to merge it. Now we have CI baked in to the main branch. Cool. You're all set. Thank you very much. That's been merged. All right, friends, now you can see your .github directory there. That's going to live in, if you're using GitHub, the reality is that you'll probably have that .github directory in there at some point or another. It just is going to be the foundation for so many great pieces of functionality. So I encourage you to get familiar with it and be comfortable with it as much as you can. So let's go to that Actions tab again and add a new workflow. So now we should be looking at the same interface, which was all your previous workflows that have run and some contextual information about that. But let's go ahead into the new workflow and select that. And go ahead, again, what are we gonna do? We're gonna package up this application as a node module and store it in GitHub Packages. And so for me, I know that, you know, for me, excuse me, I don't have a ton of familiarity with this, but I was testing a little bit this morning, a little bit yesterday, and I feel like we could figure it out together. If we struggle a little bit, you know, I just hope that you're patient with me, and we hope to pull you along if, you know, if you get stuck on anything. There it is. Okay, cool. So here's the workflow. Again, the nice thing is this workflow's already been designed by or developed by somebody else out there. And that's such a tremendous benefit of having the open source community on the platform. We talk about it all the time. Like, what does that actually mean? Why do I care that the open source community is on GitHub for an enterprise? And it's because you benefit from things like this, right? Now your developers can just come in and set up this workflow, and it's one button. And that's amazing for me because I don't want to write all this stuff from scratch, right? This is just boilerplate YAML. All right, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and rename this. I think you should be somewhat familiar now with the structure of these workflows or workflow files. And so I'm gonna go ahead and name it something like a Node.js package is fine, but I think I'm gonna say to GitHub Packages. So I wanna be explicit. I'm just gonna name it to deploy to GitHub Packages. And it looks like the file itself is being named npm-publish. Shout out to NPM, that acquisition happened. I think it was a few weeks or months ago now. I don't know. My life is has been crazy in these times, right? Okay, cool. So what do we have? What's the trigger here? It looks like on release, when the release has been created, we're going to go ahead and trigger this workflow. And so just be aware of that. We're going to need to generate releases in order to kick off this workflow. And again, we're setting up the environment, so you should see some of this stuff should look familiar. I mean, it just becomes kind of repetitive. And hopefully you kind of enjoy just experimenting here a little bit and pulling in actions from the marketplace. And I see some great questions from Kenneth and some other folks, Yigdev on there, just hanging out. Very cool. Cool. All right. So we're going to keep rolling forward. Mr. Adam, I know is hard at work digging up documentation and sharing that with you. And I have the easy job, which is to share with you what I know. And he's going out there. If he doesn't know the answer, he will find it for you and we will follow up. So, you know, rest assured that you will find the technical support that you need. All right, cool. So here we are. This is that templatized workflow that I just pulled in from the community. This was not org specific, although you could create those as well. And let's go ahead and look at the jobs that come out of the box. It looks like in the VM, the first step is going to be to check out the latest version. We're going to set up the environment. Okay, and this uses explicitly Node 12. That's fine with me. I don't think we have any requirement for any specific version. It says npm CI. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's asking, like, I don't know if that's a shortcut for npm install anymore. Maybe I missed that memo, but I'm gonna go ahead and just do an npm install because I don't know what CI is. Maybe that's like another word. I mean, obviously I know what CI is, but are they using that interchangeably with test? I don't know. So we're gonna go ahead and do on line 18, npm install on npm test. Cool, thanks. Some folks are chiming in there and educating me as well. I appreciate that. I learn something every day from doing these webinars and talking to smart folks like you. So cool. All right. So what do we see on line 21? We see a step to publish to NPM, and then on line 35, publish GPR. Okay. So for this, I think what we're going to do together is keep this kind of simple. And I'm going to get rid of this step. So this actually publishes out to NPM, to NPM's registry, right? And so you can see where the registry URL is. Pay attention to this because this is going to be important for later on. But this actually shows you explicitly where the registry is, where your package would live. I'm going to remove that. So remove lines 21 to 33. All righty. And then I have from lines 21 to 33, I have publish to GPR. So that's GitHub Packages. And so you can look at the registry URL here, and instead of publishing out to an external registry, I'm going to publish that locally to my repo registry or my org registry. In this case, it's going to be scoped to my repo just to keep things nice and simple for my simple mind. Okay, again, what do we have? npm CI and then npm publish. Oh, look at that. Here, very cool. So I'm going to leave npm CI in there. A lot of folks in the line are keeping me honest saying, hey, that'll install your dependencies. So I'm going to leave that up there and use that to install my dependencies. I encourage you to do the same instead of this npm install. And in fact, maybe I'll go back and take your word for it. So very cool. All right. So let's look at the registry URL on line 29. Points back to GitHub, npm registry. And so this token, you're probably wondering where tokens live and things like that. But the one, well, a reserved namespace under secrets during these workflow executions is the GitHub token. So we dynamically generate that for you. And so this is a reserved namespace, but it will be there available at runtime. Okay, and so you don't need to go into your secret store. I'll show you where that lives and actually add this. It will be there for you. Okay, and we're doing okay on time. I think we're doing all right. We're going to publish this package. We're going to deploy that app to Azure together, and then kind of wrap up for the afternoon and send you all on your way for your date nights or your afternoon beer, or evening beer, whatever it is. All right, so here we go. Let's go ahead and commit this, and I'm going to commit it to a new branch and say, what do we want to call this branch? I'm going to name this after. So my friend Mihir, who's doing a fantastic job in the chat, I'm naming this after you, but I'm going to call it npm publish. So I hope you don't mind I named that after you, but just want to give you a positive shout out for pointing out on lines 30 and 18. And I know some other folks did too, so thank you for that support. Okay, cool. So let's propose this new file out to this new branch together. And really no workflow should kick off until we open the PR against master, because this is only kicking off when we create a new release. But I'm gonna go ahead and create this pull request. Wonderful. And you see no checks or anything. It's kind of a bare bones PR, and normally, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, that's right. Keep me honest here, GitHub's doing that too. So we actually did subscribe that last CI workflow to any PR that's opened against master. And so that was our trigger. And so that's why we have the checks that kick off here as well. Cool. And Adam, getting more shout outs. Very cool. Thank you very much. So if you have any technical questions, kind of related or not, we'd love to support you in that in the chat here. So go ahead and drop in your questions, comments, and we will get to them, as kind of quickly as we can. I know we have Adam, who's another engineer on the team, who's responding to those. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge this. If you're all following along, maybe you've already merged it, go ahead and delete that branch. And we should now see that workflow back in our main workflow file. There it is. Okay, cool. So yeah, so you see on releases, we're gonna create this awesome package. Now let's try to do it together. I don't know, is it gonna fail? Probably, maybe. But maybe before we even do that, let me show you in the settings tab of your repo. So what you should be aware of is this secret store. And so you have your local secret store scoped to your repository, right? You'd see this. And you also have your organization secrets. And so those can be defined by folks who own your organization as administrators, and they can make those secrets available to you. And that's really useful if you're deploying out to some common environment, but they don't necessarily broadcast what those credentials are. So your dev teams can't do that. But then you could go around and actually consume them in your workflows, which is great. One other thing that I'll mention here, other than the fact that these are encrypted and we attempt to redact them automatically from the logs, which is phenomenal, because we saw that as a common attack vector with customers, is sometimes we inadvertently push our tokens to the logs, right, of our CI tools. And if folks get access to those CI tools, then they have access to our systems. So that's a big problem. But we will attempt to redact that at build time or at runtime. One other thing is, you don't see the GitHub token here, but it's going to be available at runtime because we're generating it on the fly using a GitHub app behind the scenes. So I've said a lot. Let's go back to the code and make this thing do some magic. So I'm going to call it tag 1.0.0, and we might end up doing 1.0.9 all the way up to there if we keep failing this thing. But oh yeah, so you can see my past attempts here when I was running the test myself. That's kind of funny. It says the real deal, such a real deal. Deploy me in the real, yeah, cool. All right, so let's just go ahead and call this deploy me. I think this is, cool. Let's go ahead and publish this. All right, so I see that my release has been created. Maybe my actions workflow has been kicked off. I can see deploy me here, which was the name of my release. And now we're going to see this application hopefully get bundled up and stored nicely and tightly inside of inside of you know, my GitHub packages scope to my repo. Oh yeah, so there was a great comment earlier back in the chat. So go ahead and peek back in. If you're following along, peek back into your package JSON and you might run into a problem with this. So if you're getting like an auth error and it's pointing to some weird place or giving you a 404, yeah, if you're getting like a 404, you might need to drop in, instead of octo demo here, it's going to be your GitHub user account, or if you forked it into your org would be replaced here. So just make sure you're aware of that. Some of these values will need to be swapped out, and you'll get some weird errors, which can, you know, be frustrating, I know. So let's go back to this workflow. Deploy me. Ooh, we got a green check, first try. That's what I like to see. So it looks like we ran CI. Very cool, all that passed. And then we published to GitHub Packages. Boom, boom, boom. I'm gonna go to run npm publish. And I'm gonna look for a successful publish. Very cool. Okay, so it gives you the name of the package, gives you the version, the package size, and it gives you all of my credential details so that you can hack me. So you can hack this application. Let's see in our packages, I see that. Okay, cool. All right, so it's there, awesome. So that's what we did. I mean, we really took a workflow that's already been predefined for us, a really simple node app, and we packaged it up nicely, and now it's available for consumption as this package. And so you can either deploy this package. It looks like something's going on down here. I don't know what this icon indicates. If I hover over it, I probably would. But the point is that we have this package, which is now consumable. This application is not necessarily optimized to be consumed as a node module, but a lot of you out there doing open source development or inner source development want to share your packages. And so I wanted to share that piece of functionality with you before walking through how to actually deploy this thing. All right, friends, give me some indication of whether or not you've deployed a GitHub package, please. I love to see whether or not you're following along here still, or if you've done it, you know, in another project even. I'd love to get an idea of your familiarity. And we're going to go ahead and start jumping into Azure as well and just deploy this web app. So let's go ahead and do that. I will go ahead and start creating that workflow. And that workflow, I think, is going to be available for us, again, as a template. So we're going to go back into the Actions tab. We're going to create a new workflow and scroll past our org template workflows. Awesome. So Kenneth is making progress. Very cool, Kenneth. And thank you, Adam, for enabling that. All right, cool. So here we are. We have org templates, scrolling past those. Okay, so here we go. So here are some services. You know, I'm deploying to Azure because I happen to have an account, a demo account that I can use and just deploy, you know, myself. So I'm going to do that there. You can feel free to integrate any of these services yourself. If you're more comfortable with any other service provider, feel free to do that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and set up this workflow. Oh yeah, maybe one thing I should mention there before I do that. So what you'll notice is, again, who actually maintains these workflows, right? You can see this is by Microsoft Azure, so this is maintained by them. This is maintained by AWS, by GCP, and you have these maintained by your organization. And that's important because, you know, a lot of times folks ask us like, well, how can I make sure that Joe Schmo doesn't, you know, integrate his workflow back into you know, our organization. And so there are controls you can enforce at the top down, but also as a developer, most of us are here. I see there's like 100 folks on the line. Most of us are going to be responsible for that. So go ahead and set up that workflow. All right, very cool. So here we are. We're going to set up this workflow together. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to walk through this workflow and just understand what it does. And then we're going to go ahead and deploy it out. Actually, I have the environment already stood up, so maybe I should preface with that. And this might be an area where you kind of, you know, if you've been following along up to now, it's okay to just watch along unless you feel like spinning up your own app service. You can just look over my shoulder. So I set up this really simple Azure website. This is basically what Azure does. Like, excuse me, when you set up an app service and have it deployed to it, it shows you this little web app interface. So we're going to deploy there. We should see our beautiful blue calculator there. And if we have time, we might do something wild like make that calculator pink or green. The sky is the limit. So let's go ahead and look through this workflow one more time. All right. So what are we triggering on? We're triggering on the release when it's been created. We set some environment variables for the runtime environment. And so these are configurations that you will need to do in order to successfully deploy your app. Okay. And so for me, mine is Twitch-Production. I believe that's the name of my app. We'll see what errors I get. I always get errors. All right, cool. So Azure web app name, Twitch production. I'm gonna leave the package path as my root and the node version. We've kind of got some wacky node versions all along here. I guess folks along the way are, you know, kind of hard coding that in, and we will probably at some point need to update these, and I'm sure at some point there'll be regressions. But anyway, it's good for now. So this is what it tries to do. It tries to build our app and deploy it, right? And so we set up the runtime environment. It looks like Ubuntu again, totally good with me. I had some folks that were trying to build .NET Core applications with, and they set up a Windows environment. You could just as easily drop Windows in here, and you know, you'll have that at runtime. Okay, so we're gonna check out the latest version of this code. We're gonna set up the environment at this version, and we're gonna do a few things. So you can see we're gonna run npm build, install, npm or build, and then npm test. So somebody was very smart and just said I should just do CI. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'm just gonna get rid of this other junk that I probably don't need. Or maybe I'll run my test too, actually. Or the CI, yeah, so let's just do this just for now. Cool, keep it super simple. All right, so, and at line 40 to 45, what do we have? Deploy to Azure web app. So this is something that's interesting. So this you all are going to care about. So just if you've been kind of, you know, looking at another a tab so far, watching YouTube videos of cats, I would encourage you to check this out. So on line 41, what you can see is we're defining the specific version of this action that we're pulling in at runtime. And that matters because you can also set this to something like latest, right? Or with this explicit version, you know that you're locked at this point in time. And what we're going to be doing is, actually we're doing now with that Dependabot, the security updates we talked about, we don't just look at dependencies that have vulnerabilities, but we're also gonna look to update your workflow files. So that's a really cool feature that you'll have. Hey, there he is. Who is that? Lerictometer, you rock, great call out. So yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and drop in here that Mr. Cool. So some folks are calling it out in the chat. Great that you called it out. Thank you for that. So I'm just going to drop that in there so we know who you are. And let's keep rolling forward. So thanks for the engagement in the chat. Encourage you, if you have any questions, comments, drop them in there. This is supposed to be kind of fun. I know it's been a little bit of work, but it's been pretty fun along the way as well. All right, the last thing that I'll mention, and then I'll click this commit button that we all want me to click so badly. I'll go to the settings page, and I want to show you just where my secrets are, because I just want to show you that you'll need to drop in your web app publish profile here. Mine is already populated. I did that before we jumped on the line, because obviously you don't want to drop your credentials in when you got a bunch of, you know, kind of clever hackers on the line watching you code. So I had to do that, my friends. So I'm a fraud. I've admitted it. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and open up the commits here and just say that we are going to, what are we going to do? We're going to deploy to Azure, right? So we're going to call this deployment workflow. Deploy, I want to make that lowercase because I do. Okay, so we're going to make this a separate, onto a separate branch. We're going to open a PR. Friends, we are very close to making this thing deploy. Our checks should populate here. So those that populate, I'm going to merge it and not wait. While I do care whether or not those pass, I'm just going to go ahead and merge it anyway so that we can keep rolling forward and get this thing deployed, you know? So let me go ahead and, well, I guess I should have created, okay. So let's go ahead and deploy this now. What do we say? Deployed on a release being created. npm publish. Yeah, okay, on a release being created. So let me go back to that repo homepage. Let me go ahead and create a new release. Draft a new release. I'm just going to call it 2.0.0. I'm going to call it new deploy. Or how about this? All right, so that should go to Azure and not fail. So if it fails, you know we broke from the script. So, okay, let's go back and watch that actually run so you can see. Okay, so really two workflows triggered, right? So you had your GitHub Packages workflow triggering. So that's going to actually deploy a new version back to GitHub Packages. And then you're also going to be deploying out to Azure. So I believe that is this build and deploy workflow. Yeah, okay. I believe so. So it looks like it's running my tests, which have so far passed. And now keep your fingers crossed. We're going to try to push this out to Azure and see how that goes. All right, package deployment using zip deploy initiated. I just want to check on the packages one. Sometimes there's a naming collision, and I kind of struggle to get beyond that naming collision. So I will, if that happens, we'll work through it together, or if there's more interesting things to talk about, which there is, we'll talk about those. So this should be deploying to Azure. I'm just going to give it a minute to do that, and we'll just go ahead and validate. One resource that I did want to share with you before you go, because I know we're at the end of our time here, and I'll validate that we deploy this to Azure. One resource I think is really important is lab.github.com. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't already gone here, I'm just going to go ahead and drop this in the chat. Mr. Kenneth has been engaging all along the way, so thank you for that. Yeah, so I just want to drop that in the chat, lab.github.com. It's basically an interactive environment where you can go, and we have some automation behind the scenes that actually teaches you how to use some of these components. And so gives you a great intro into the security aspects of GitHub, some of your secure workflows, how to collaborate across the platform if you're completely new to GitHub or have teams that are. And so that will allow you to go pretty deep, and there's actually learning paths that I think are super great. So I definitely encourage you to do that. So maybe what I'll do then is actually do a hard refresh and see, okay, so it's like we're actually still hung up there. Oh no, we're running up against the clock, folks. So we're gonna go ahead and let this thing deploy. Okay, so it looks like there was some naming collision probably that happened in the packages run. Publish to NPM. And cannot publish over existing version. So if you get this, you just need to rename in your package JSON. You just need to do some renaming. And this way you're not going to be overwriting your previous package. And so I think what we're hopeful for is just to see this thing deploy. And what's interesting about this is then what we can do is, instead of subscribing this workflow to, and this is kind of, this is kind of like going over the top, but what we can do in the future is subscribe this workflow to, rather than when a release is created, subscribe it to when a pull request has been successfully merged into master. So when you push the master, right? And then you have really continuous deployment out to hopefully at least maybe just a staging version. So yeah, so go ahead and just, consider doing that, even just in your own test environments. Could be a fun exercise. I think we're all just waiting here, for this to get that like final, sense of gratification, satisfaction that as developers we're so used to striving for all day long and never getting, or getting rarely. So this looks like it's deploying. Oh, okay. So what's happening? Something happened. Okay. So we see green checks. I don't know. Oops, I opened Sublime. All right, my friends, we got 1 minute, and then I'm going to let you all run. But thank you all so much for your time. I think we did pretty good here. I'd love to have you see this calculator as it pops up. Come on now. Deploy to Azure Web App, Twitch production, SCM, Azure website. Let's go ahead and go to this URL here. All right, we did it. 1 minute left. Congratulations. I hope you followed along. I hope you had some fun. I hope you learned something. I know we had fun setting this up for you, and obviously along the way as well. And we hope to see you back in the future. So please come back, share your learnings with us, share your feedback with us. And it was an absolute pleasure to be here and connecting with you. So have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.